Good afternoon and welcome to the first ever IVAW Northwest Winter Soldier event. This is one of the many events that the Seattle chapter has been working on to bring awareness about and bring an end to this horrific war. Our efforts have included a successful Soldier You're Not Alone concert, as well as GI rights protests outside of Fort Lewis, which reached out to active duty soldiers throughout the area. We are also able, through aggressive fundraising, to send 14 members of our chapter to the Winter Soldier testimonies outside of DC that happened in March. Thanks to everyone who helped us raise funds for that event. And now here we are today at the Northwest Winter Soldier to show that American policies in Iraq and Afghanistan are leading to war crimes. Winter soldiers, according to the founding father, Thomas Paine, are those who stand up for the soul of their country, even in its darkest hours. Today, it is difficult to challenge our government's policies after September 11th attacks. As the great Dr. King once said, a time comes when silence is betrayal, and we will not be silent. We, as Iraq veterans against war, are standing up and speaking out. Whether we are concerned about the injustices here in America or the perpetuation of violence abroad, we have an obligation, not only as veterans, but Americans, and also as human beings, to do what we can to stop it. Now, what does deserve silence is the memory of the dead. The 4,000 American soldiers and over 1 million Iraqis. But let us also include the thousands of brothers and sisters who have been failed by the VA system. Also, one of IVAW members, Thomas Young, is a young veteran who's recently paralyzed less than a week after arriving in Iraq. And he's been out of a coma since Monday, so he's being our moment of silence. If we could please have a moment of silence. Thank you. I have a couple of announcements to make before we get started. Most of you should have a flyer here, The Tyranny of Oil, on your seats. And this is a book recently written by Antonia Juhas. And she'll be speaking later on in one of the panels on corporate pillaging in Iraq. Also, too, if anybody here needs or feels overwhelmed by these testimonies, we have healthcare professionals down in the back of the lobby, and they're there for you, for your support. And for those who would like to volunteer for peacekeeping, please meet in front of the IVAW table before the last panel. As well as at the IVAW table, we have the report of the citizens hearing on the legality of U.S. actions in Iraq. It's the case of Lieutenant Aaron Watada, and that's free for y'all to pick up at the IVAW table. Now I'm going to pass it over to Michael.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming here today. My name is Michael William, and I'm the Northwest Regional Coordinator of IVAW. I have deep respect for all whom have been touched by this illegal war of aggression. The veterans of the global war on terror carry many wounds and memories which are difficult to share, and I applaud these representatives of the Northwest region of Iraq veterans against the war who are brave enough to speak. Not only are they here to expose their painful personal experiences, they are speaking out about the institutionalized racism, sexism, and bigotry which pervades the military. They are speaking up about the rapes and murders happening in our bases, and they're educating you on the stark epidemic of post-traumatic stress disorder which haunts this generation of service members. Each speaker deserves your applause, but due to the length of this panel, we ask that you please hold further applause until the end. I've never met a more patriotic group of young men and women than in the ranks of IVAW. I've never found them quibbling about the size of flag lapel pins, but whenever there's a gathering of IVAW members, you can be sure a copy of the United States Constitution is near at hand. IVAW members still remember their oath to defend the United States from enemies, both foreign and domestic. And this struggle begins here, speaking to a public which was misled into an illegal imperialist war under false pretenses. With such high costs of human life and limb, I'm saddened when to many people the only cost which they can relate to the Middle East is the rising cost of gasoline. I've spoken with many people in our community, and though they all seem to be echoing the same disgust for the occupation, they seem to not know what to do about ending it. As you listen, I ask all of you to attempt to relate to the words you hear today. I hope that their words will inspire you to stand up with your conviction that this war was unjustly started and must justly end. As you listen, think about what you can do to support these veterans who are standing up for what you believe in. I have a few suggestions about what you can do to end this war. You can tell your friends about IVAW. You can visit IVAW.org and view our congressional testimony from May 15th, as well as our Winter Soldier testimony from last March 13th through 16th. You can join the IVAW Coalition, a diverse group of local activists who banded together to support IVAW and our demands for immediate withdrawal from the Middle East, reparations for Iraqis, and full VA benefits for our veterans who have given so much. You can write letters to the editors and to your representatives. You can support and encourage GI resistors. You can donate care packages for our service members overseas. And you can start demanding accountability from the Bush administration, which continues to shed the blood of so many of our country's most courageous men and women, while they and their friends turn a profit. But for now, you can please silence your cell phones if you have not done so already. And please listen to our first speaker. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Seth Mansel. I was a sergeant in the Alpha Company, 1st of the 5th Infantry. I was a specialist while we were over in Iraq. I was a driver, a vehicle commander, and a 240 machine gunner for a time. I joined the Army after 9/11. I was working at a gun store when the economy took a downturn, and being the newest employee, I was laid off. My wife and I had a new baby at the time, and after doing some temporary work as a security guard, I joined the Army. My recruiter told me that my wife would be able to use my GI Bill to complete her bachelor's degree. While this turned out to be a complete lie, we were without recourse. Out of my 4 years of service, I was fortunate to have only served in one deployment. Many people who joined at the same time as I have been on several deployments by now. Many have been stop-lost, and I'm very fortunate to have gotten out when I did. Occasionally, I stop by the barracks of 2nd of the 23rd Infantry on Fort Lewis. It's their Rear D barracks. A Rear D unit is the unit that takes care of administrative issues while their parent unit is deployed. They're comprised largely of wounded soldiers and soldiers no longer able to function in Iraq. The scene there is devastating. The chow hall has a wheelchair ramp. There are men walking around on crutches. There's no women in infantry units. I'm not excluding women, but the unit's at a breaking point. Soldiers with physical and mental pain self-medicate, leading to disciplinary and legal problems. You cannot expect people to use force, coercion, and brutality as a sole means of dealing with people for a full year and a half, and then expect them to return to society without problems. My own experience in Iraq hardened my ideas that this war is wrong. I'll share a story out of my journal that I kept while I was in Iraq. At the time we were guarding a police station in Tal Afar. I had just assisted in the questioning of a prisoner, and another was brought in. This second prisoner was a prisoner of the Iraqi police. I stayed in the room while an Iraqi police officer interrogated him. There were 4 men on top of the prisoner. One was smothering him with a blanket, one was pummeling the poor man's kidneys with his fists, another was striking the man with a cleaning rod from an AK-47, and the last was attempting to insert a bottle into the prisoner's rectum. Television had always portrayed torture as a rather well-ordered affair that involved some sodium chloride dental picks. In reality, it looked more like a frat house gang rape. I had left the room a couple of minutes earlier to get a translator. Before I had left, I had told Ali, an Iraqi police officer, not to hook the prisoner's feet to an electrical cord. Ali had told me through Pidgin Arabic and sign language that if he touched one of each of the wires to the prisoner's feet, he would feel it in his genitals. I told him no and went out to find the interpreter to question the man. As we entered the office, we saw that more people had joined into the interrogation. The prisoner's hands were bound and he was lying on his stomach. His eyes were blindfolded and his flannel shirt had been torn open. I could hear him trying to scream through his gag. His face was a mask of pain. No, I said, you can't torture him. The man with the bottle got up. The punching stopped. The man with the cleaning rod struck the prisoner once more for good measure, then sat him up facing me. He had cried through his blindfold, and when they removed the gag, he drooled bloody saliva onto his white clothing. Since the Abu Ghraib scandal, the U.S. has shied away from torture as a matter of policy, or at least the U.S. Army has. The CIA still does it pretty regularly, and other government organizations. The Army outsources this activity to the Iraqi police. In Mosul, prisoners who were uncooperative were sent to the police station where they were tortured and sent back willing to say anything. When I was in Tal Afar, I had to work in our detainee holding area. These prisoners were kept for weeks with their hands bound. This precluded them from any kind of practical hygiene. The prisoners smelled, they had rashes on their bodies, some were very ill. They were kept in a drafty shack with plexiglass walls and muddy floors that sat in the middle of a large mud pit surrounded by concertina wire. One time, an Iraqi man approached me while I was on guard there at the detainee center. He told me that his father was ill and needed medical attention. The old man was lying on his side and writhing in pain. He was jaundiced. The son explained to me that his father had suffered from an inflamed prostate and could not urinate. I went to get the medics. They arrived and said that the old man was just too lazy to get up and use the latrine. They said that they were not obligated to treat prisoners. When I protested, they asked me if I was a medical professional. They scolded me for wasting their time and left. The things that we do in Iraq are disgraceful. They sully our country's good name abroad and diminish our credibility when we confront other countries about their human rights records. How can we possibly criticize other countries when we treat people this way? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ash Wilson. I'm 26 years old. I'm from the Bellingham chapter of IVAW, chapter 32. I joined Wisconsin Army National Guard in 1999 to pay for college. I come from a small town, and as many people that join the military know, there's less and less financial aid for people that want to go to college, but yet there's more money in the military promised for college education. I joined the National Guard specifically because they paid 100% tuition, and we were promised not to be deployed overseas. I was deployed twice, once to Nicaragua for a peacekeeping operation, and in 2003, in February, I was activated before the invasion. I wasn't in the invasion. I went there in May, and I was stationed in Talil, Iraq, south of An-Nazariya. My unit is combat engineers, and although we didn't do any combat engineer requirements in Iraq, we did security force. And we worked with civil affairs a lot, and we did security for important personnel. And what I want to emphasize is the loss of humanity during war. The value of human life is reduced to nothing. What I saw disgraced me as a human being and changed my perspective of the purpose of war. I saw how no one that is involved in war benefits. The civilians in Iraq, they don't benefit, and the soldiers returning from Iraq, they see no benefit either. The only people that see benefit are the corporations that are profiting from the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. Before we would go on missions, we would have briefings of the type of combat that we would see in the area that we were in. And one thing that was often told to us was that the Iraqi children are dropping hand grenades in vehicles. I had never seen this, but we were told to keep the children away from the vehicles at all costs. And now this created a problem because the first soldiers in Iraq were giving candy to the Iraqi children. So whenever you roll into a town, children rush your car asking for halawa, candy. And we were told that the children can't be close to us. So what some soldiers did was buy slingshots, and they would shoot slingshots at children. Rocks, pebbles, BBs, anything. But more commonly, we would hold our guns at the children and threaten to shoot them. I did this. At children as young as 6 years old, I would hold a gun to their head. We had 2 people in my squad that were under 19 years old. One kid had turned 18 2 weeks before being deployed to Iraq. And he was given the choice of shooting children or not. This is a grave decision for such a young guy. I was 21 when I was in Iraq, and I was the second oldest person in my squad. This showed me that the decimation of humanity that is involved in war. When I got back from Iraq, I self-medicated, I drank, I got arrested, DUIs. And last year, I went to the VA. I went to the VA for help. Tried to file a claim for PTSD. And the therapist that determines if you have PTSD said, you have PTSD. But there's no benefits. There's no help. So the VA works against the soldiers returning from Iraq. 18 veterans commit suicide every single day. Thank you.
My name is Jan Critchfield. I was in the Washington Army National Guard. I joined in 2001, straight out of high school. I was 17 years old. I joined a journalism unit, and we were attached to the 1st Cavalry Division in Baghdad in 2004. One of my first missions in Iraq really brought me in contact with the problem of operating in an urban environment. I was covering in one of the 1st Armored Division. We were first attached to the 1st Armored Division, but it was an ambulance unit, and they were transporting from an Army hospital to a Red Crescent truck 2 Iraqis that had been shot at a checkpoint. And just imagine driving through your hometown. You've been driving through there on maybe the same route to and from, home to work or something like that, and then all of a sudden there's barbed wire across the road, and you're being shot at because you're driving too fast at that checkpoint. And that's what had happened to these 2 people. It was a man and his wife, and she had been shot through her shin bone, and it had been shattered. And so, that was the first story that I covered when I got to Iraq. The second thing that I wanted to talk about was when I was on a night patrol near Toledo Square, which is near Haifa Street. The way that a patrol will move is you'll move sort of parallel to the guy across the street from you, and you'll watch the rooftop above him. And so I was watching the rooftop, and it was nighttime. It was really dark. A lot of Baghdad has narrow alleyways because it wasn't built for cars and everything like that. And we were moving along, and it was all deserted. This was late at night, like 11 or 12 at night. And like I said, I was watching the rooftop over top of the machine gunner that I was with. And I saw somebody moving on the rooftop, and it caught my attention, and I raised my rifle up, and I saw somebody staring back at me through one of the holes that was in the wall there. And I couldn't, it took me a second, like I said, it was dark, but I mean, after a couple seconds, I realized that it was a little girl, and she was just looking back at me, and I was staring my rifle straight at her face, and it took her a couple seconds to realize what was going on, and then she ran off. And that's just one of those situations. I mean, you have these what are called tactical checkpoints that are set up like on the fly. That's one situation that a civilian could be injured or killed. And also just in a sort of a confusing, maybe you're being told that it's a dangerous part of town, and patrols had been having grenades thrown at them from rooftops. And so when you're told these things and you're put in that situation, you might be just that much closer to pulling the trigger on somebody that is totally innocent. The other situation I wanted to talk about was another mission, maybe a month later in the same area, same unit. We were moving down to what we called the Syrian apartments, which were where a lot of foreigners had lived during the Saddam regime. And we had moved down to the base of some of the apartments. We hadn't searched any of them or anything like that. And then all of a sudden, a sniper started firing at one of the Bradleys there. And he was on top of one of the apartment buildings. And there had been people in this square that were going about their business, Iraqis that were going about their business, doing errands and everything like that. And then as soon as the shooting started, they all started running in all directions. And one man carrying a bag started running towards the squad that I was with. And he didn't see us, I don't think, until he got within 20 feet. And I was waiting there for him, pointing my rifle straight at his chest. And like I said, he has a bag in his hand, and you hear about people, like I was talking about, you hear about people throwing grenades off of rooftops. Well, you hear about people carrying a bag. Maybe there's a bomb in the bag. Maybe, people talk about, well, they could have bombs, strapped under their robes or something like that. And so, when you're put in those types of situations, I had my weapon off safe. I was this close to killing this guy, and he was just running errands. So those are the two situations I think that really have stuck with me the most since I returned. I think, like, looking back, it wasn't the times that I was shot at myself or anything like that, or the danger that I might have been in or anything like that. It was the times that I came close to murdering innocent people. And since I've been back, my way of looking at those experiences has changed so much, and just remembering things like how people would watch videos of Iraqis being killed by coalition forces. Say, there's some actually fairly famous clips if you go on YouTube. You can search for them yourself, and you'll actually see people commenting like, F those Hajis, kill them all, that kind of stuff. And they would watch what I call war porn, and they would laugh about it, and that's the other factor, is this sort of element of dehumanization. If you start to say, oh, I'm going to go down to the Haji Mart, or I'm going to, and Haji was an epithet that people used to just describe all Iraqis, like any Iraqi was considered like a Haji. And so, when you start to refer to people by that type of a term, they start to look less than human. Obviously, like, people were always like, oh, well, I'm not sure who in the community is an enemy. They don't wear uniforms. So, if you have people that are out there that don't view an Iraqi death the same as like a U.S. death or something like that, then you start to put people in situations where they might be just a little bit more likely to pull the trigger. And I also wanted to talk about my unit's job. We were, like I said, I was a journalist. We were journalists that were covering the 1st Cavalry Division. And sort of the unspoken, it wasn't like a directive that we were given. It wasn't a set of orders that we were given, but we were there to counter the liberal media bias. And this is something that, our audience was the Killeen, Texas area around Fort Hood, which is where the 1st Cavalry Division was based. And so, you know, the emphasis was on reporting on humanitarian aid missions that U.S. forces were doing. It wasn't on some of the more negative things that maybe we'd come across. I don't know how many stories I wrote about chicken drops. And the chicken drop is where we go out into a community and we distribute frozen chickens to them as a sign of goodwill, or, you know, hey, don't shoot at us, we're giving you chickens. And that was probably one of the most common types of stories that I would write. And it was, you know, I wrote about, say, a transformer station opening, but I wouldn't write about how it got blown up 2 weeks later. So, there was definitely a slant that my journalism had while I was there. So I don't know what else you could call that other than propaganda. And that's, like I said, our target audience were U.S. citizens with all of this. So we weren't really briefed on the situation there, the politics, the history of the country. I would basically interview whoever the highest ranking person that I could get my hands on, and put, you know, their stuff in verbatim without really doing any fact checking. That was kind of the way that my workflow went. We also hired Iraqi journalists to write articles for the local community over there, and so and we would invite them to our media operations center and everything. So they were definitely producing news of a certain perspective. One more thing that I wanted to talk about were just what things that we're doing over there that might be angering people and making them want to fight against this. And I think that as far as what I saw was just the inaccuracy of intelligence and the inaccuracy of the raids that we were doing. We would go into people's homes and it would be any military-age male. And these people are the people that are going and they're the breadwinners of these homes a lot of times. And so if you go into a community and you start abducting every male between the age, the youngest person I saw arrested there was probably 10 years old, I think. He was accused of throwing grenades at a patrol. And, you know, I don't know how old the oldest was, but it is anybody that was military age. And you go into communities like this, well, what do you expect? Are they going to fight against you or not? You know, they're going to Abu Ghraib, you know? And I think I probably was on a patrol or a raid that found actual munitions maybe once or twice. Usually it was their own personal AK-47. And also just that sometimes it would just be a neighborhood rivalry. They would be like, okay, we'll go over to this house, this guy's a bad guy, and well, do we actually base that on any evidence? No, we just go and we knock on the guy's door and take him to prison. And then he would be handed over to the Iraqi police, which is what Seth was talking about. So thank you for listening to me. I'm done.
My name is Sergio Corgan. I've served 4 years in the United States Marine Corps with 7th Regiment. I spent 2 deployments in Iraq. First was during the initial invasion, and I was there from March all the way till November in the city of Najaf. And my second deployment was from August of 2004 through March of 2005, which I spent on the Syrian border. First things I want to cover is as soon as we got to the unit and we received the word that there's a possibility that we're going to be invading Iraq, pretty much propaganda starts spreading. They start telling us that you have to be ready for your little kids to shoot at you, be ready for women to fight you, and just saying that, pretty much saying everything to make those people seem like they're animals and they're lower than everybody else. During the first during the first deployment, our primary mission was as a humanitarian work, and during the whole deployment, all the way till November, the only humanitarian work that we did was probably a week or two trying to fix a park in the city, which city was devastated by everything, and that was the only thing we did for a week or two, and it was a different platoon. And after that, the only thing we were doing is harassing people, driving like crazy on the streets, pretending like it's our country, it's our city, and we can do whatever we want to do. One of the times at the ammunition supply point that we were guarding, because they had a lot of ammunition saved up from whatever they were collecting when Saddam Hussein was in power, we were ordered to protect it and take necessary actions to make sure that those people that trying to steal it, which was probably trying to feed their family, because I mean, people barely have any food and water there. And what we would do, we would catch them, we would harass them, we'd tie their hands up behind them, put them on their knees, and that's what Saddam Hussein used to do to execute people. And we knew that people knew it, and we would put them on the ground, and we would just fire shots like we were shooting at them, shoot at their cars, shoot in the air, calling them names. There was, and continuously, we were told to, everybody wants to get you, everybody wants to kill you, you have to be careful, everybody's against you, we're just here to make sure everything goes clean. Racism. And the thing that struck me the most is that when I joined the military, I was trying to escape things that I was exposed to back home. And when I came in, it was really sad to see that it was racism in the military to their own troops, out loud in the open, from pretty much every rank. And it was ridiculous. And that was one of the things that it seemed like a fun joke, and you know, that joke turned into destroying people's lives in Iraq. And the next thing I want to cover is my second deployment. I was deployed in the town of Husayba, Al-Anbar province, right on the Syrian border. This time I was a member of a scout sniper platoon, so our mission was a little bit different. Pretty much what we did, we just go out in the town and search for people to shoot. The first day, as soon as we got to our base in Husayba, the second day, our company commander, our first lieutenant, and one of our NCOs got blown up by an IED. And rules of engagement before were set to, if you see any weapons, call it in to make sure to get a clearance to shoot people. After that, the second day, suddenly things start changing. If you see a person with a weapon, shoot him. As it continued, and then the more casualties we received, the rules just went lenient and lenient and lenient. It got to the point where we had to go out in town and look for people with heavy bags and shovels on the intersections acting suspicious. Well, number one, a lot of Iraqi citizens trying to rebuild their country, and a lot of them carried those bags and the shovels. And a lot of people would stand, take break, probably from walking, and we would call in and we would take the pictures and we would send them in, and we were allowed to take our shots if anything was suspicious. And at that point in time, everything was suspicious. You can't tell me there's something suspicious. It's something more solid, but we didn't really pay attention to it because we were pissed off, we were angry, and we were tired, and we just wanted to go home. Later on, we had no rules of engagement at all. It was go out there, and if you see something that you think is not right, take them out. And later on, probably 2 months before we went back, one of our intelligence units that we lived with, they received a call from one of their people that were helping them out in the city, giving information. They said that there are flyers on the streets all over the town telling people to stay off the streets if if they're just standing on the streets, because there are known snipers in the city that take killing insurgents and innocent people. And when they told us that, it didn't even register, because when we had to shoot somebody, we would always send pictures or we would call in. But now, looking back at it, it's disgusting. It makes me sick just to think that I was so deep into it, I didn't even question what I was told to do. And those people were amazing. And every time we come in contact with people during the first deployment, second deployment, we maybe came in contact with 2 families that we occupied their house for 24 to 48 hours to use it as an observation post. And they were telling us that just leave. We're tired. We don't know where to go. We turn left, they shoot us. We turn right, they shoot us. We had one family telling us that everybody's so sick and tired of the number of insurgents causing all the problems and the U.S. troops being there, that if we leave, they can just take things into their own hands and fix it and get rid of those little numbers that putting all the Iraqi people in danger every day. And I just want to say that enough is enough. We're done. It's not working. We went there trying to help them. Obviously, we're not doing anything, and it's time to get out of there. And we need to also take care of our troops. One more thing. One of a guy that I lived with, shared the bathroom with, pretty much roommates, he was on suicide watch for a couple months before we were deploying. 3 weeks later, we had a family day, and 3 weeks before that family day, they let him off the suicide watch because they didn't want his parents to see it or to find out about it, I suppose. Then as soon as we deployed, about a month and a half later, 2 months later, he blew his brains out in the shower head. A lot of us come back, only we're trying to go get some help. Psychologist lines are like 1.5 years, 2 years long, and the only thing they give you is medication. They give you sleeping pills that you use with alcohol, and you pretty much abuse everything trying to keep your mind off the things that you've experienced. And that's about it. Thank you.
Known as Sergeant Simpson, U.S. Army. I joined the Army when I was 18. Main reasons for me for joining were purely financial. I was couch surfing at the time. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. So I went to a recruiter, went to MEPS, and they were like, hey, do you want to be a counterintelligence agent? I was like, oh, that sounds cool. So why not? Anyway, I joined the Army July 2001. I was in basic training. Actually, the field exercise part of basic training, which is when you're basically like out in like the woods for your final like part when September 11th happened. And at first, I totally didn't even believe like what happened, because I heard stories about the U.S. Army like lying to people, telling them that like North Korea invaded South Korea when people are in the field. But once I started hearing like Dan Rather, like Peter Jennings, like over the radio, I was like, man, this is like real. This actually happened. But I was in the military for 5 years, and I was very, very lucky that I actually only had to go to Iraq once. And while I was there, I was a member of a tactical human intelligence team. And as Evan said earlier, basically the intelligence cycle in Iraq, when I was very involved in it, like I get to see all the different aspects of it, and it's completely ridiculous and very, very flawed. And this is kind of the basis of the war in Iraq, or what we're doing during the occupation. So I want to talk about that for a little bit. While I was there, I worked a lot with Kurdish militia groups, informants, or basically just with the same thing as a snitch basically here would be, people aiding U.S. and gathering information. And I mean, it's obviously a flawed thing. People, you know, the U.S. military, they'll pay money for people to give information to us, and usually they don't have to provide any sort of evidence that any of these people that we'll hand money to, or any of the people that they're reporting on, have anything to do with terrorist attacks or the insurgency or whatnot. We'll just pay them, so they'll give us the names of people who they just dislike for some reason. Maybe a neighbor they have a feud with, or just anyone. Sometimes I think it would just be random people. And this information would be the basis of the raids that we would do. And the raids, I know like lots of people here tonight are probably going to talk about this, but they're one of the more traumatic experiences for me in Iraq that I saw, and I'm sure for the Iraqi people, because we're lucky that for most of us, not everyone in the United States, like immigrants don't have this luxury, but most of us here do, is that we don't have to worry about our doors being kicked in the middle of the night. You know what I mean? Like I can go to sleep tonight and be fairly certain that no one's gonna kick in my door, scare me, arrest me, arrest my parents, arrest my family members. But the people of Iraq don't have that security. And it seems like to me, we've been in Iraq for, how many years now, that eventually your door is gonna get kicked in. Eventually, U.S. soldiers are gonna talk to you. One story I have, which was pretty traumatic for me, was in Iraq, sometimes people used to like to blow the gates of houses off. And at one point, when I was there, the unit I was with, on the raid was with, they blew the gate off of to a home. And there was the grandfather, I guess the grandfather of the person we were like looking for to detain, he was in the courtyard. And he heard the explosion, got so scared, had a heart attack and died, right? Now, after we searched the house, we found nothing of any sort of intelligence like value. We found no weapons. I think maybe we found an AK, but that's like common in Iraq to have one AK-47. We didn't find anything that would like link this guy to the insurgency. And I feel even really terrible about this too, but I'm gonna share it anyway. But we detained that individual and some of his family members, even though we found no evidence. And when I got back, I actually interrogated this individual, and I even remember saying that, like telling him about how him being involved in the insurgency killed his grandfather. You know what I mean? Like, was this guy involved in the insurgency? I don't know. I doubt it. Like 95% of the people we arrested had little or nothing to do with the insurgency, but we were still told to interrogate them anyway. Also, one of the things about interrogations was that we were always like, as an interrogator, we were always told to like physically go all out on the Iraqis. Like if I went down there, talked to someone, came back to my officers in my unit and was like, and told them basically, I don't think this person has anything to do with the insurgency. I don't think they're lying to us. I think we just arrested for really no reason. We didn't find any evidence. And people would tell me, and the officers there would tell me, well, you're not being mean enough to them. You have to go down there and put the screws to them, like treat them worse, and then they'll talk. And I would get angry because I would just be like this is such a waste of my time. This guy doesn't know anything. But I would still have to go down there and yell at the individuals, like scream at them, knock over tables, throw chairs. They'd fall on the ground, scream at them while they're laying on the ground. And it was actually really insidious because I would be taking out my frustrations at my chain of command on some poor guy who's just trying to take care of his family. And I don't know. To those individuals, I'm sorry. And I'm sure they're not here, obviously, but it really bothers me. And someone also mentioned like loss of humanity during war. And I even found to the point where like I would get so frustrated by this, the interrogation and the intelligence cycles, that I would actually like if I could get information out of people, I would get enjoyment out of the fact that they would be like, crying. Like if I let a guy back to his cell after interrogation and he was in tears crying, that was almost like as good as being successful in actually getting information out of someone. If I thought I did a really good job, I could get the detainee to actually abuse himself, which happened numerous times where like, I would threaten detainees and they would actually like smash their head up against a wall till they were bleeding. And, I had to lead back bloody prisoners and explain whatever happened to them. But as far as that was like the extent of what I did, which is mostly just like psychological torment, which I still don't think is acceptable, especially when it's innocent people who are just under military occupation. But I did see what the Iraqis did to detainees, and it was extremely terrible. We used to get, sometimes we would turn people over to Iraqi security forces, and they would bring these people back. And when I would see these people, like the only equivalent thing that I could compare it to was like photos I saw in like American history textbooks of you know, basically pre-Civil War slavery. You know, individuals with like scars all over their body, bruises all over their body, like basically not an ounce of flesh that is like unmarked. You know, and they would come in with these huge list of crimes that they supposedly admitted to under interrogation, and that's another thing too about torture. It's an extremely ineffective way of gathering intelligence, which I don't even see why our government even wastes our time with debating if, you know, waterboarding is even acceptable, because people will admit to anything under torture, whether they did it or not. And even when we would get this information that all these individuals said under torture, these like huge list of, you know, that they admitted to doing every terrorist attack that's ever happened in Iraq, like we couldn't even use it, because basically I would ask them about it and they would say that I just admitted that because I was being tortured. And I don't know if that's true or not. Like maybe he was involved with insurgent attacks on US, but the only way we can really find that out is if he willingly tells us it isn't coerced through the use of torture. So the torture debate to me is just a ridiculous idea that should be ended, and hopefully we don't let the politicians keep bringing it up. That's what I'm talking about. I came back from Iraq. I got out of the Army. I became a reservist. And while I was a reservist, I started going to school at Evergreen, started learning more and more about the Iraq War from a different angle, like reading books that kind of, with my experience, piece together the whole picture of like what's actually going on in Iraq. And then I was told that I was getting switched to a unit in Texas to go back to Iraq again for the second time. And really interestingly enough, for school that week, I was actually reading Frantz Fanon's Wretched of the Earth. And in it, he talks about, you know, he basically mentions at one part, soldiers refusing to take part in colonial wars, you know, and I was reading this, I was like, man, like, I can't do this. So basically, then and there, I decided, like, you know, I'm done with the Army. Like, I've did my time. Like, I can't take part in a war like this. Like, I don't even know how I can mentally go back again, because I don't really want the U.S. to win. I don't want the U.S. to be successful in Iraq. So basically, I said, fuck it. And which basically, like, hopefully more soldiers reach that realization as well. But last week, this kind of bummed me out a little bit, but I see where this guy's coming from. I read in a zine where a soldier says that he doesn't get caught up in the politics of what's going on in Iraq. He just does what he has an oath to do. To us, this might sound like a reasonable response or a reasonable action, but I don't think we should let soldiers like think that this is a justifiable excuse. You know, we shouldn't let people basically be ignorant and think that just because they made an oath to protect, you know, to do whatever the military tells them, that's a reason not to revolt, not to basically refuse these deployments. So basically, I'm just like what Courage to Resist says. You know, we need to support the troops that refuse to fight, because those are the ones who really need our support. I'm trying to think what else I want to say before we go. Basically, before I get done, hopefully we can take what we learned here and not let this war end without us becoming a catalyst for lasting change that prevents other Vietnams, Iraqs, or any other imperialist adventures that our government will continue to wage as long as it continues to exist. Thank you.
Right before I came down here, I went and picked up a sandwich at the Subway on Broadway, and a couple guys came up to me and they said, were you over there? They saw my shirt, and I said yeah, and they said that they had a couple friends that were really messed up, and they appreciated what we were doing here today. I've got a lot of friends. I've got a lot of friends that have terrible experiences they could share with you, that would bring you to tears and make you sick to your stomach. But the thing is that the majority of those people, they're not able to get up here and testify. So I'm grateful to have the opportunity to testify, but I apologize that my testimony won't be near a large enough picture of how terrible and just how just completely immoral and absurd this has really become. I was very, very lucky. I did 4 years in the Army as a Cav Scout, and my 4 years was getting up just in January 2004. Another friend of mine, his 6 years was getting up, and he was supposed to get out a few months before me. I received a notice that I was going to be I was stop movement. I wasn't supposed to leave my unit till 2007, which is another 3 years after I was supposed to get out. But my friend, who was supposed to get out before me, was told that he was supposed to stay in the military for an additional 2 or 3 years. So I can't stress how lucky I really was. I slipped out of Iraq. My unit spending 15 months over there, and myself spending 6 months. I knew it was just a bunch of bullshit, us going over there from the beginning, but it really, my experience over there, the importance of my experience over there is the calm before the storm, and really cementing what I know to be true, and that the longer that we're over there, the more our presence will inflame the violence, and the worse it will be when we leave. It's not that when we leave it's going to be rosy, of course. I think the idea of us going over there was like fixing a delicate pocket watch with a sledgehammer. We were supposed to go in through Turkey into the north of Iraq, but there were some political problems there, and so we ended up missing the war to many people's regret. And we ended up going through Kuwait. We relieved the unit that had led the charge into Baghdad. We relieved them, 3-7 Cav, my unit, 1-1 Cav, and. These guys, they had the stare, they had killed God knows how many people and done God knows how much destruction. And we were relieving them. They were going home, and we were going to take up the occupation. They ended up getting pulled back and sent it to Crete for additional 12 months after they had gotten to Kuwait and they were about ready to go home. When people began to figure out what was going on. There was a buzz in the air when we relieved them that higher up, command, General Sanchez, they were all very, very critical of these guys we're relieving, 3-7 Cav. They had done nothing to secure the infrastructure, provide law and order. It was a disaster, a complete disaster. Even the ruined, half-built, half-looted, destroyed, bombed-out palace that we were taking residence in was completely looted. I mean, as much as you can imagine, the wires pulled out of the walls, the windows, the carpet, doors, everything. And that was inside of the compound that we were staying in, let alone the city itself. The city was a complete disaster. After even a terrible 2 weeks, we finally got outside of our little bubble. We had further strengthened our fixed the walls that the 3-7 Cav had knocked over and blown to pieces, and secured the compound. We began to go out and interact with the Iraqis, and. First sneaking around in the night, then walking around in these patrols in the cities. I had no idea what the hell we were supposed to be doing. There was a day of urban warfare training or something, and I missed that day because I had some kind of duty. It was just totally ridiculous. The sewage was running in the streets. There was no power. There was then of course, you know, it starts to dawn on us that there's something else going on. The first, the children started throwing the stones at us, and the first kill was a sergeant who had come in late. He killed the groom at on his wedding day. We came around our ridiculous, the corner with one of our ridiculous patrols, and there was this Iraqi standing in the middle of the street firing his AK-47 up in the air, and the sergeant dropped him there in the street in front of his family and everything. It was just one of the first things. And then of course there was the checkpoints that we had to man. One with a group of tankers. A platoon sergeant thought it was a good idea. They'd been out there for days, losing their mind. No clear idea what the hell they're even doing there, right? They'd missed the war. They're just kind of wasting time over there. They thought it was a good idea to pull out their dicks and wave them at these little kids that were playing in the mud outside one of their checkpoints. I was at another checkpoint with the father of these kids walked up and reported it to some of our interpreters. It was just, of course, it was just something that could get swept under the rug. I mean, so many of these just sick, ridiculous anecdotes happened because they had no clear mission. People over there losing their minds, losing the discipline. This checkpoint I was at, I saw several of the Iraqis come in, zipped up with those zip ties, their hands behind their backs, their feet, and tied up like animals, and thrown in the back of Humvees like burlap sacks of potatoes, and it was a very strange thing to see. The first one. Prisoner that we took was a strange situation. A man walked up to the checkpoint. He was totally naked, and the sun was blazing. He's walking out there bare feet on this burning ground, and I think this is a little strange. I tell my NCO, and he walks out there, puts the man on the ground. And he's got these zip ties on him. We're all now getting these zip ties handed out to him. He ties his legs and his hands up behind his back. And we're like, what do we do with this guy? The interpreter comes out, tells us he wants to see his brother. He's not armed. He wants to be very clear to show us that he's not armed. The sergeant begins to make fun of the man's genitalia, mock him. And the interpreter's kind of like very nervous here, and then we're like, well, he wants to go see his brother. Let's send him with the rest of the POWs, wherever the hell they're going. It was just the most kind of sick thing you could imagine. Then we were going into the homes late at night, and the more we interact with these people, the more we hurt them, damage them, embarrass them, brutalize them. Late night inspection. A man pulls a gun on me. Of course, I should have killed him according to rules of engagement, but there's no clear understanding of what the rules of engagement are in the situation. I don't kill the guy because I have a feeling he's not really that bad. Sergeant tackles him, beats him on the ground in front of his entire family. He ends up being a police officer. Thank God I didn't kill him. And so we just beat up a police officer that was working with us in front of his entire family. These things continue to happen. A friend of mine, I used to go over there to try to keep sane, and when I get a chance to get away from my scout platoon, he was in supply, and he was laughing, and he was telling me that the other day he had gone out with this guy Lala, this big giant 300-pound guy. I don't know what he's doing in the military, and he's so huge. And they had found some terrorists, they said, and they had grabbed them and they were throwing them over their heads into these piles of Constantino wire. And he was, I'll wrap it up. It was it was just a continual escalation of this brutality, and then they continued to escalate, react right on back with us. The roadside bombs began tearing into our vehicles. the darkest moment for me was a man walking up to me when I was guarding an overpass, and he said, he was talking to me, and I didn't understand what the hell he was saying, but he's bawling, he's crying, he's pointing over there, he wants help, and I say, if this is one chance I can help these people, I've got to help him right here, and I was told to send him away, and he wouldn't go away because he needed help so desperately. And so I shouted at him. I said, "Get out of here! Get the hell out of here!" And the man left, and this hopeless look in his eyes, and he looked at me and walked away. And I know that we had, God knows what happened, but I had failed to do anything positive over there. I just like to say that we need to know that the Democrats aren't going to be saving us here. They talk about 60, a majority in the Senate. That's a lie. It takes 40 to filibuster. They could have done that from the beginning. I like Obama, but he says he can't do it alone, and he's not lying. These people have got to be held accountable. Senator Cantwell told me and several other activists 3 years ago that they had the control of the purse strings, and if Bush did not start getting the troops out of there, and if it did not start to be making some improvement over there, they would cut the funding, and they have failed to do that. They have failed to do that, and they need to be held responsible.